Hello everyone and welcome to my video lecture series. So in the last lecture we had completed with internal respiration, okay, and today we are going to start with cellular respiration, which is the last part of mechanism of respiration. So we have already covered breathing, external respiration, internal respiration, and today we are going to do cellular respiration, which is a very small topic. Okay, so let's start with that. Now, what is cellular respiration? So, cellular respiration basically occurs in the mitochondria of the cell. Okay, so now we have already studied that the red blood cells bring oxyhemoglobin, correct? And what happens is, as the blood reaches the cells, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, which is very high, it forces the hemoglobin and oxygen to break down, right? So that Hb4O2, which is coming, it breaks down into Hb plus 4 molecules of oxygen, and these 4 molecules of oxygen, they enter the cell, correct? And the respiration starts. So respiration is divided into many stages. The first is anaerobic respiration that occurs in glycolysis. We are not concerned with that. However, there is a part called as aerobic respiration which occurs in the Krebs cycle, and it occurs in the mitochondrion. Okay, so it occurs in all the mitochondria of the cell, and this step is called as cellular respiration. Okay, and this step is very important because it results in the production of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy currency of the cell, correct? So now this formation of ATP in the mitochondrion, it takes place in two steps. The first step is called oxidation, and the next step is called as phosphorylation. So let us see how these things occur. So first of all, let us study what is oxidation. So oxidation is basically the breaking down of organic compounds with the help of oxygen. For example, glucose that comes from the digestive system, that is broken down with the help of oxygen, or you can say that the glucose is oxidized and the products formed are carbon dioxide, water, and a lot of energy is released. So if you want to write it down, I can write down the reaction like this: C6H12O6, which is your glucose, reacts with 6 molecules of oxygen. Oxygen is coming from oxyhemoglobin, correct? And the products formed are, so this is the organic compound glucose, and inorganic products are formed. For example, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water plus 686 kilocalories of energy. Are you getting this point? So this much energy is released. Okay, so this 686 calories of energy which is released, that is then used to form ATP. So ATP is not directly formed. Please remember, when we write the respiration reaction, we write this entire reaction, but instead of writing 686 calories, we write 38 ATP, but that is not directly formed. So this is the first step, and this is called as oxidation. So this reaction, you know, so this happens in the mitochondrion. Now the second step of cellular respiration, that is called as phosphorylation. And what is phosphorylation? So normally whenever we add a phosphate group to any compound, the reaction is called as phosphorylation. So now already in your mitochondrion, in the matrix, you are having adenosine diphosphate, correct? This adenosine, di means 2, adenosine diphosphate is present. Also inorganic phosphate is present. So what happens is, this energy which is released in the oxidation step, this 686 kilocalories, some amount of energy from that energy is used up, okay, to form ATP. So approximately 7.3 kilocalories of energy is used, and this energy is used to bind both the ADP and the inorganic phosphate. So if you have your adenosine diphosphate, imagine this is your adenosine diphosphate, 2 phosphate groups, and if I add one more phosphate, then it will become adenosine triphosphate, correct? And that is exactly what happens. One molecule of ATP is formed. Is this clear? So slowly more and more energy is taken out from this 686 kilocalories, and you get more molecules of ATP, and finally from one glucose, the amount of energy released can help in creating 38 molecules of ATP. Okay, please remember, now some of you will go and start calculating. So you will divide 686 by 7.3 and you will get the answer somewhere around 93, and then you will think, why 93 ATPs are not produced, why only 38 are produced? Friends, this energy which is released, most of it is lost as heat that cannot be used. So that is why only 38 molecules of ATP are produced. But for producing one molecule of ATP, you require 7.3 kilocalories of energy. Where is that 7.3 kilocalories coming from? It is coming from this oxidation step. Is this clear? So one glucose will give rise to 38 ATPs. So net reaction, if you want to write down for cellular respiration, then that net reaction is C6H12O6 plus 6 molecules of oxygen will give you 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water plus 38 molecules of ATP. This is called as the net respiration reaction, correct? So that ends your cellular respiration. You needed ATP. All these processes, okay, breathing, external respiration, internal respiration, cellular respiration, all that is happening just to produce ATP. Are you getting my point? So please remember, respiration doesn't only involve respiratory organs, but it is also dependent on your circulatory system, and it is also dependent on your digestive systems. Okay, so all these three systems are working together, because you will not get glucose without digestive system. You will not be able to transport oxygen or carbon dioxide without circulatory system, and obviously you require lungs for taking in oxygen and removing out carbon dioxide. So is this clear? So that ends our cellular respiration. You just have to explain how ATP is formed. These two steps you have to explain, and that's it. So with that, friends, we have completed mechanism of respiration. Please pay attention to my last lecture, which was based on internal respiration. It is the most important part in this entire mechanism series. Okay, so now we move forward. The next thing that we are going to study is something called as regulation of respiration. Okay, so let me write that down. Okay, so regulation of respiration. Okay, now what do you understand by this regulation of respiration? So see, respiration which is occurring, that breathing which is occurring, that is basically controlled by your brain. Okay, and that is called as regulation. So the brain or the nervous system regulates or controls your respiration. Now which parts inside the brain control your respiration? So there are two main parts. Okay, the first part is called as the pons, and the second part is the medulla oblongata. Okay, so I'm sure you must have heard of these two terms. Okay, so all those students or all those people who are unaware, the brain is divided into three parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. Okay, so I will do one thing, I will just write that down. Okay, the forebrain, that is the uppermost part of the brain, the midbrain, which forms the middle portion of the brain, and the third part is called as the hindbrain. And the hindbrain is basically made up of three parts: pons, cerebellum, and medulla. But cerebellum is not involved with respiration, so I'm not writing that down. So both these parts, okay, pons and medulla, they are basically a part of the hindbrain of your brain. Okay, so now how do these two parts control respiration? So both these parts which control respiration, these parts are also called as respiratory centers. Okay, so respiratory centers are parts of the medulla oblongata and the pons which control your respiration. So how is your respiration controlled? So there are two things which these respiratory centers do. They control, so let me write it down over here. The respiratory centers control your respiratory rate. Okay, so first thing that they do is they control the respiratory rate. And the second thing is they control the depth of respiration. So I'm going to explain both these terms. So what are medulla oblongata and pons varoli doing? Okay, pons varoli is the entire name of the part. So first is controlling the respiratory rate. Controlling the respiratory rate means, see, the average respiratory rate of an adult human being is 12 to 16 breaths per minute. So in 1 minute, an adult on an average takes 12 to 16 breaths. So if he is taking 16 breaths, that means he is inspiring 16 times and he is expiring air 16 times, correct? So that is the average value. But sometimes if you notice during exercising or during sleeping, that respiratory rate increases or decreases. So that is controlled by these respiratory centers. That is the first function. Second is controlling the depth of respiration. Depth of respiration means how much air you are taking inside your lungs. So normally when we breathe, we don't inflate our lungs fully. However, if you try to take in more air, you will realize that your lungs can expand even more. So depth means how much air you can take in. So both the rate and depth of respiration is controlled by these respiratory centers. Is this clear? Okay. Now these respiratory centers are basically divided into three groups. So let me write that down. Okay. Three groups of respiratory centers. Okay, and these groups are basically groups of neurons. Okay, neurons, everybody knows these are the brain cells or cells of the nervous system. And out of these three groups of respiratory centers, two of the groups are present in medulla and one single group is present in pons. So I'm just going to draw this small flowchart which will help you. Okay, so the first group is present in medulla. Okay, the second group of respiratory centers is also present in medulla, and the third group of respiratory centers, it is present in pons. Okay, so that is why we say that respiratory centers are present in medulla and pons. Okay, there are three groups or three regions of neurons where they control respiration. Now let us have a look at the first group. So the first group of respiratory center is called as group of dorsal neurons. Okay, so these are basically dorsal neurons. Dorsal means the backside. Okay, so neurons which are present on the dorsal surface of the medulla oblongata and which control respiration, they are called as the first group of respiratory center. The second group which is present in medulla, that is a group of ventrolateral neurons. So they are present on the ventral and lateral surface of medulla oblongata. Okay, so ventrolateral neurons. And the third group of respiratory centers are a group of neurons which are present in the pons, and together those neurons are called as the pneumotaxic center. So pneumotaxic center is the region in pons where all the neurons help in maintaining your respiration. Okay, so is this clear? So pons and medulla help in regulating or controlling your respiration. There are three groups. Two groups are present in medulla, one group is present in pons. These groups are basically centers of neurons which are present. Okay, two of the groups which are present in medulla, one is dorsal group of neurons, second is ventral group of neurons, and one group present in pons is called as pneumotaxic center. Now let me tell you the functions of each of these groups. Okay, now the first group of dorsal neurons which is present in medulla, so that acts like an inspiratory center. So let me write it down over here. This acts like an inspiratory center. What is an inspiratory center? An inspiratory center is a center which starts inspiration. So what is inspiration? When your lungs get filled with air, that is called as inspiration. So this center basically starts inspiration, and till this center is on or till it is working, your lungs will continue to get filled with air. Is this clear? Coming to the second group, So these group of ventral neurons which are present in medulla, they act like the inspiratory center, and they also act as the expiratory center. So they are dual in function. Okay, so they also help in inspiration. Once your lungs are fully filled, they also help in expiration, that is removal of air. I hope this is clear. And the third group, which is the pneumotaxic center, so this center basically limits inspiration. So I will just write it down over here. Okay, this group, its function is it limits inspiration. Now what is the meaning of limits inspiration? So basically the pneumotaxic center basically controls how much air is going inside the lungs while inspiring, because if your inspiration center is continuously on, you will continue to breathe in air even when your lungs are full, and if that is not stopped, your lungs will burst. So what prevents that from happening? This pneumotaxic center, which limits the amount of air. So once your lungs are full, this pneumotaxic center takes charge. Okay, now in the state board textbook, extra additional functions of this pneumotaxic center are given, which are not required in respiration, but since they are given, I will explain it to you. So another function of pneumotaxic center which is given is it helps in deep sleep. Okay, so in your book for deep sleep, they have given slow wave sleep, so that is when you are in very deep sleep, and it also helps in REM sleep. Okay, and REM sleep also is rapid eye movement sleep. So both those things are given in your book. Okay, but you don't need to remember that for respiration. Obviously your respiration rate changes during different cycles of sleep, but these two are also the functions of the pneumotaxic center. So anyway, what is important for you? Three groups: pons varolii and medulla oblongata. Two groups present in medulla: dorsal neurons, ventral neurons. Pneumotaxic center present in pons. What is your function of dorsal neurons? It acts like inspiratory center. What is the function of ventral neurons? Acts as both inspiratory, expiratory. What is the function of pneumotaxic center? Acts as an inspiratory limiting area. Okay, and also helps in deep sleep, which is called as slow wave sleep, and rapid eye movement sleep. Okay, another extra thing which is given in the state board textbook is that they have talked about a point called as apneustic center. Okay, so I will just shift this slightly to the left, and they have used this word apneustic center. Now again, this is not important from your respiration point of view, but since it is mentioned in the book, apneustic center is a part which lies in the medulla oblongata. Okay, so this is again a part of medulla, but in the book they have given that this apneustic center is antagonistic to pneumotaxic center. What is the meaning of antagonistic? Antagonistic means that it is opposite in function. Okay, the meaning of the word antagonistic means it is opposite in function. So if apneustic center is opposite in function compared to pneumotaxic center, so that means this apneustic center, first of all, it doesn't help in deep sleep, it helps in light sleep. So when you are going to wake up, at that time this apneustic center takes control. Okay, so it helps in your book they have given the functions. It helps in wakefulness. So wakefulness is when you are about to wake up. Okay, so it is opposite of deep sleep. And second is while you are sleeping, it helps in non-REM sleep. Non-REM sleep is non-rapid eye movement sleep. So its functions are exactly the opposite of pneumotaxic center. So again, this apneustic center is not important, but since it is mentioned in the book, all the people who are giving the NEET exam, you might as well remember it, because a question can be asked. Is this clear? So are you now aware? Are you now aware about these three things that I have told you? I hope it is clear. All the three groups, I hope both the parts are clear. Now let us come to this last part of regulation of breathing. Okay, and in this last part we are going to see the mechanism of how brain controls breathing. Okay, so now let me just rub this off. So this part about regulation, questions are asked, but mostly the questions are asked in an MCQ type of pattern or a one sentence type of pattern. Bigger or short note questions are not asked, so it is not very important. However, you have to know all these three groups anyway. So the next part that we are going to study is how the breathing is controlled by the brain. Okay, so I'm going to draw a flow chart over here. Okay, so these are the lungs. Okay, I'm just drawing a flow chart. So these are your lungs. Now what happens is, when you are inspiring air or when you are taking air inside your lungs, okay, the lungs get inflated or they get slowly filled, and what happens is, after a point your lungs are completely inflated or filled, right? And after that, if you still take in air, then that might damage the tissue of your lungs because they are already fully expanded. So to prevent that from happening, there are receptors which are present, okay, and these receptors are called as stretch receptors. So what are stretch receptors? Stretch receptors are basically sensors present on your lung, and when your lung gets fully expanded or fully stretched, at that time these stretch receptors, they become active. See, when your lungs are not fully expanded, when they are relaxed, at that time these stretch receptors are not active, they do not become on, they are off. But when your lung is expanded, it is full with air, at that time these stretch receptors become on or they become active. As soon as these stretch receptors become active, what they do is they send a signal. So I am writing when active. So when the lungs are full with air, fully expanded, so at that time these stretch receptors will become active, these sensors will become active, and they will send a message to the expiratory center. Okay, there are many expiratory centers, group 1, group 2. So these expiratory centers will receive a message from the stretch receptors that the lung is fully inflated. And whenever expiratory centers get a message from stretch receptors, expiratory centers know, okay, now the lungs are full, now inspiration needs to stop. So what expiratory centers do is, expiratory centers send a message to the inspiratory center. Okay, so your inspiratory center is there. What is the function of inspiratory center? The inspiratory center controls inspiration. So all the air that goes in the lungs is because of inspiratory center. So that inspiratory center is on. But when the message comes from stretch receptors, expiratory centers shuts off the inspiratory center. Okay, so this becomes off. So who can control the inspiratory center? The expiratory center. And who sends a message to the expiratory center that the lungs are full? Stretch receptors. So now your expiratory center has got the message from the stretch receptors. Okay, so these messages are sent via nerves, and a very common nerve which is called as the vagus nerve, that vagus nerve carries the message from the stretch receptors to the expiratory centers. Expiratory centers get the message, they switch the inspiratory center off. As soon as the inspiratory center switches off, the inspiration stops. As soon as the inspiration stops, the expiration begins, because expiration is passive. So what happens because of expiration? Your lungs again begin to collapse, correct, because they are losing air. So as soon as the lungs collapse, now your stretch receptors become inactive. So if stretch receptors become inactive, then stretch receptors do not send message to expiratory center. And if expiratory center is not getting message, so that means it again turns the inspiratory center on. And again when inspiratory center is on, you will start inspiration, again same thing will happen, again you will breathe in, your lungs will be full. Once your lungs are full, stress receptors will become active, they will send a message to expiratory center, expiratory center will turn off the inspiratory center, again they will collapse. So this cycle keeps on occurring. Are you getting this concept? Okay, this entire cycle is commonly called as Hering-Breuer reflex. Is this clear? So Hering-Breuer reflex is this reflex which goes on as soon as your lungs are filled. Which parts are involved in this? The stretch receptors on the lungs are involved, they are the sensors. Then your vagus nerve is involved as the message goes from the vagus nerve, from the stretch receptors through the vagus nerve to the expiratory center, and obviously your centers are involved. Who is controlling your inspiratory center? The expiratory center is controlling. But when is it controlling? When it is getting a message. So the expiratory center will only turn the inspiratory center off when it is getting a message from the stretch receptors. When it is not getting a message from the stretch receptors, it will keep the inspiratory center on. Is this clear? So if your stretch receptors are not functioning properly, then your lungs might get damaged because you will take in more air than what your lungs can take in. Is this clear? Okay, so this mechanism is called as Hering-Breuer. Okay, so it is Breuer, that is called as Hering-Breuer reflex. Very important from exam point of view, from your NEET exam point of view, or your HSC exam or your CBSE exam point of view. Is this clear? So that is how the brain controls your respiration. Okay, now the last part in this regulation of breathing is, so I would like to ask you a question: is breathing involuntary or is it a voluntary function? So if I ask you, while sleeping, what controls respiration, what controls breathing? So it is involuntary, right? You don't have to get up and breathe. It is happening automatically, it is involuntary. But suppose if I ask you the question, what if you are in a swimming pool and you put your hand underwater? Do you continue to breathe? No. So you stop breathing till you are underwater. Then once again, when you put your head up, you start breathing. So at that time it is voluntary. So breathing is involuntary or voluntary? What do you think? So basically it is an involuntary process. However, for safety or for precaution, for some amount of time you can control it voluntarily. For example, if you go in some area where there is a lot of smoke, you can stop your breathing for some time. Please remember, not infinitely. Or suppose if a garbage truck passes you by, then you can stop your breathing to avoid that smell. Or if you are underwater, you can stop your breathing for some time, but you can only stop for a limited amount of time, because once you stop it for a longer time, the carbon dioxide concentration in your blood is increasing. Please remember, when you stop your breath, the cells are continuing to produce carbon dioxide, so carbon dioxide will keep on increasing, and there are receptors which basically detect carbon dioxide, and they will send signal to your brain that now you have to breathe. So for some time you can hold your breath, but then you will be forced to breathe. So it is a voluntary process for some time, mostly it is involuntary. And please remember that breathing is a voluntary process because respiration is also connected to your cerebral cortex. This is given in the book. Cerebral cortex is cerebrum, and cerebrum is a part of the forebrain. So all your voluntary activities, they are controlled by the cerebrum, and hence for some limited amount of time, if you want to stop your breath, you can stop your breath. Okay, is this clear? And with that, friends, we end the part of regulation of breathing. I hope this part is clear. Okay, so we have completed cellular respiration, we have completed regulation of breathing. Now I wanted to complete one more part which is given in your book, and that part is related to carbon monoxide poisoning. Okay, so most of you might be aware about this. What is carbon monoxide poisoning? So carbon monoxide molecular formula is CO, right? Monoxide, single oxygen. What is it? It is basically a pollutant. When is it produced? Incomplete combustion of anything produces carbon monoxide. For example, if there is some fire in the building, or when you burn some waste material, at that time carbon dioxide is also produced, carbon monoxide is also produced. Now what is carbon monoxide poisoning? So the thing is, hemoglobin is present in RBC, right? And this hemoglobin, as you know, it can bind to oxygen, it can also bind to carbon dioxide. Obviously the attraction for oxygen is much more compared to carbon dioxide, affinity is more. However, hemoglobin has highest affinity for carbon monoxide. Okay, and the affinity for carbon monoxide is 250 times higher compared to affinity for oxygen. So 250 times more attraction hemoglobin has for carbon monoxide compared to oxygen. So that means even if carbon monoxide is at a lower partial pressure and you breathe carbon monoxide, it has higher chance of attaching to hemoglobin even though oxygen has a higher partial pressure, because the amount of attraction for carbon monoxide is much more in hemoglobin. So what happens is, if a person, just take this scenario for example, a person is trapped in a room which is burning, there is a lot of smoke, so that person is continuously inspiring that smoke, and because of that carbon monoxide is going in the lungs. What will happen? This carbon monoxide will rapidly bind to the hemoglobin. So we can write that down like this: hemoglobin plus carbon monoxide will give you HbCO. This compound is called as carboxy hemoglobin. So now this is the third compound which you know. First compound we studied was oxyhemoglobin, second was carbaminohemoglobin when carbon dioxide attaches. When carbon monoxide attaches, the compound is called carboxyhemoglobin. Now the problem with this is, this carboxyhemoglobin when it is formed, it doesn't dissociate. See, oxyhemoglobin dissociates when partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high. Carbaminohemoglobin dissociates when partial pressure of oxygen is high. But carboxyhemoglobin doesn't dissociate even when that partial pressure of 104 oxygen, 104 millimeters is present, it doesn't dissociate. So what is happening is, this HbCO continues to remain in the blood. So all your hemoglobin molecules will get blocked by carbon monoxide. So your hemoglobin will not be able to attach to oxygen. So your tissues will not get oxygen and you will die of suffocation because they are not getting oxygen. Is this clear? So that is why this carbon monoxide poisoning is a very, very dangerous situation. Sometimes the cases are not very, very serious. Small amounts of carbon dioxide, if they enter the lungs, then treatment is possible. These patients are basically given concentrated oxygen to breathe. So that is having a lot of concentration of oxygen, and that high concentration will have high partial pressure. That extra high partial pressure of oxygen when these patients breathe in, that helps in dissociating the carbon monoxide. So your regular breathing of oxygen, that regular partial pressure of 104 will not dissociate Hb and CO. Only when you take in concentrated forms of oxygen, that is possible only when you take it through a oxygen cylinder. Only then slowly carbon monoxide will dissociate from hemoglobin and then it will be given out. Is this clear? So carbon monoxide poisoning is a very dangerous situation. It occurs only because the affinity for carbon monoxide in hemoglobin is 250 times higher compared to affinity for oxygen. Okay, so that ends our part of carbon monoxide poisoning, and that ends our lecture for today. Okay, so next time, maybe in the next two lectures, we are going to complete with this respiration part. Okay, so now disorders are left. Okay, lung capacities is a part which I have to teach. So what is respiratory volume, tidal volume, IRV, ERV, all that I will teach. So those are basically small references which are there, and you have to understand the meaning of that. I'll teach that. Then there are respiratory disorders. Then there is some information given regarding ventilators. So I don't think it should take more than 2 lectures, but that's the end of our today's part. So we completed cellular respiration, and with that we completed mechanism of respiration. We completed regulation of respiration, how the brain controls, and I also taught you carbon monoxide poisoning. Okay, so if this lecture was helpful to you, please put in a like, please share with your friends, and please do subscribe if you are watching this lecture and you have not subscribed to my channel, and press the bell icon so that you get all the updates as soon as I post my lecture. Okay, thank you.